Hey everybody, this is Doug with 2 Plus Tough, and before this show begins, I just wanted to chime in here and say that this week I am going to be at Nova 2019, and I'm very excited. If you are at Nova at the time, like the week leading up listening to this, go ahead and reach out to me on Instagram or Facebook, and we would love to meet you, my wife and I, and we'll get a game in, get some drinks, and have a good time. You can follow me in the description down below on Instagram to see tons of pictures of the event, as well as on Facebook. All that stuff gets directly ported. Now, for this week's episode, I had a wonderful guest who you'll hear in just a minute. I had an absolutely great time talking to him. One thing to note is that there was a small technical problem where my audio was coming from the wrong mic, so the audio levels aren't quite balanced the way I normally like to do it, but I cleaned it up as best I could, and it does sound pretty good. I've heard far worse out there, so go ahead and enjoy the show, and next time we'll have that all fixed up, and we'll get back to usual. So thank you so much for your patience. I look forward to seeing you soon. Hello, everybody. Welcome to While You're Reforging, and today I have a very special guest, a man who needs no introduction, but since you can't see who it is, it's an audio format, I will go ahead and introduce him. This is Michael with Doom and Darkness. How you doing, buddy?
Good, thank you, mate. How about yourself?
I'm doing quite well. I'm glad I was able to get a hold of you. I don't know. I've been enjoying your content for, 2 years now? How long have you been making stuff?
Well, I've been making stuff for about probably 4 or 5 years now, is since I started the YouTube channel, but started off in Warhammer Fantasy and then Age of Sigmar in the early days. Been going the whole time, really.
Sweet. Well, if anyone doesn't know who you are and what you do, you have a awesome YouTube channel which features some of my favorite kinds of battle reports, just 20-minute quickies where you recap the turn of the phase, I suppose. More by the phase, right? But
Yeah.
an absolutely stellar content in terms of just talking about the game and the hobby and that kind of stuff. I love it. So you're going to be my main guest for the night. So we're going to go through hobby progress and games we played, and then we'll jump into you and I's main topic of talking about why a good rule set isn't just for competitive, hardcore, win-at-all-cost people, but it's really beneficial for everyone, even the narrative players and the open play people and that kind of stuff. So we will jump into that. So let's kick off with some hobby progress. What you been working on lately?
Well, I seem to be working on everything at once at the moment. So I've just finished my Stormcast, or my Shootcast as is. So long strike, sort of heavy army. Mm-hmm. And then I've just also finished off the last touches on my Bloodbound. So it's a pretty much all mortal Bloodbound army, and I try to make it as strong as I can, but I'm not taking Bloodthirsters or I'm not doing that sort of thing. I'm really just sticking to the theme that I love, and then trying to make that as good as I can. And as always, the army that is front and center in my heart, the Mighty Gutbusters, and I'm just getting a tournament list ready for them at the moment. So
sweet.
I've been painting 18 Iron Guts, which is a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's awesome. I just had a question. I tipped my tongue and then I totally lost it.
That's all right. What are you working on at the moment?
No problem. So since the last time I recorded, I've been doing quite a bit. I cranked out the Corpse Rack Mausoleum terrain for Warcry. The Corvus Cabal, I just finished this morning, and now on while we're recording, I'm doing my Iron Golems, which are pretty much the studio scheme, which I kind of like. It's actually... Go ahead.
You're doing them in the red?
Yeah, but the way I'm doing it is I base them with Leadbelcher and then use Blood Angel's Red contrast paint over that. So it gives this metallic cherry, and I love it. And then do various
Actually,
washes.
I'm doing something very similar for my black metal on my armor.
Yeah.
I do a Leadbelcher and then just the contrast black, and I find it's just that that perfect balance. Like it's not so black as if I just put Abaddon black straight over it. But no, I like it. It has the right sort of darkened black look to it. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was one of the things I was excited for when Contrast came out. And I was a little confused when they didn't have a whole bunch of tutorials right away, because I was like excited for like the weird stuff you can do, like using different base colors and that kind of thing. So,
well, that's how I'm mostly using it at the moment. To be honest with you, is that spray the model and then I put down a layer of contrast over pretty much everything. So the pants, the flesh, and then everything except the metals. And then I go back over with layer paints and just add another layer. And I find that, I don't know, I just find it far more effective instead of doing your layer and then washing it and then another layer, just contrast it, which does the wash as well. And then your one layer over the top and you get the same effect. You kind of blot the colors in as well before you start the layers. So yeah, I really like it that way.
Yeah, no, that's exactly how I'm using it too. Yeah, it just, I find it saves me time because I hate having to go through all the base coats and then go back and wash.
Yeah.
But I've been really enjoying it, so that's cool. I'm glad that somebody else is like on the same page as far as like, it doesn't have to be all contrast. It's just it's just a tool. So yeah, if you want to check those things out, obviously they can go to your channel and check out your battle reports. Do you post things online like Instagram or Twitter and anything like that?
I've got a Facebook page where people can get a bit of a preview of what's going to be coming up.
Okay.
And then Twitter as well. Twitter is always one of the best ways to see what I'm up to, and also if you want to contact me, and because the Facebook pages can be a bit awkward sometimes.
Yeah.
But yeah, Twitter's probably the best way to get in contact with me.
Okay, cool. Right on. We'll check that out. So, what kind of games have you played recently? Anything new and noteworthy?
Last night, I just had a game against Daughters of Cain, so it was my Khorne Bloodbound against Daughters of Cain.
Okay.
And it was pretty brutal, I have to say. We just had the new Azerite Ruins. I had the new Azerite Ruins kit set up, and the table looked absolutely fantastic. And Skull Reapers against witches. It's pretty horrendous. Lots of dice, lots of murder, and it was a really good game.
That's awesome. How did you? So you're doing a mostly Immortal kind of Khorne, from what I understood earlier.
Yeah. So it's the list. I don't know if you can hear that background noise, but it's just absolutely started bucketing down here at the moment. So
oh geez,
yeah. I can hear anything coming through.
That's cool. It's rain. Everybody will get over it. It's all good.
All right. So the list is essentially like it's a pretty thematic list because it's Gore-Tide, and I'm actually running Gorgus Cull.
Okay.
Just for fun. I mean, there's it's not just for fun. There's a competitive reason there as well. But so it's Gorgus Cull, Mr. Whippy Boy, the Blood Secretor, and then 2 Slaughter Priests.
Okay.
And then I've got a big unit of 15 Blood Warriors, 2 units of Flesh Hounds, 2 units of Vestigor allied in.
Ooh, okay.
They're just my super fast, run out the front, line breaker units.
Yeah.
Like hit my opponent, hit them hard, clear their chaff. And if they die, which they do, I haven't lost that much, and gives me that blood tithe to get the blood tithe rolling. So, and then I've got some Wrathmongers to make everything go extra crazy, and that's really about it. So the Hounds and the Vestigor really run up. They're my forward fighting units, and harass the flanks and smash the front lines. By the time they're dead, they've done some damage. I've got the blood tithe up. Just should be able to really get my Skull Reapers in there and mince some enemies. So
sweet.
And Gorgus Cull, a lot of people don't like him. They think he's too expensive for what he does, but he's got this 8-inch pile-in trick, and also a reality splitting axe. So at the moment, we have all this rules complication with the activation wars, and and I just find he's a nice little tool to be able to sit a bit back and then just do that 8-inch pile in after everything else is attacked and hit it, and possibly suck something into the warp. So it's kind of that combination of fun and cool, but
Yeah.
there's a reason for it as well.
That's awesome. And I love when models kind of fall into that, like, that perfect space of, like, they're not so good that everyone takes them, but there's a reason for them to exist. And
Yeah,
for folks who want more of a flavorful list and that kind of stuff, it's for fun and for, yeah.
I normally try to do that with pretty much all of my armies. Is take something that's not completely optimized. There's that sacrifice of what's best on the tabletop in brackets,
Hmm.
and what you personally like and think's the coolest.
For sure.
So I always try and take what I personally like and think's the coolest, and then try and make that as the best as
Yep.
I possibly can,
Yep.
and then try and play as well as I can with that to do as well as I can, knowing that I'm always selling myself a little bit short, but it doesn't mean that you can't still get up there and mix it up with people. So
Oh, totally. Yeah. Especially if
yeah.
you like an army that people aren't expecting.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So that's sweet. Okay. Well, it sounds like we're kind of on the same page there.
Yeah.
So what actually, just to kind of end the intro part here, we'll go ahead and we'll take a quick break, and then you and I will jump into our main topic for the night, which is talking about why important rules matter why clear rules matter for folks who aren't competitive at all. So we'll jump into that. All right, everybody, we are back. I'm still here with Michael from Doom and Darkness, and a topic that I wanted to bring up, and I actually wanted to talk about it with you specifically, where on my list of people to talk about was you did a video, and I was about to say recently, but I have no concept of time, so it was probably a couple months ago, regarding the GHB and the changes there,
Right.
and expressing some very warranted frustration with, like, the game balance and the idea of ogres being as deadly as ever and all that kind of stuff. It was kind of a rough. And one of the things that I saw someone respond, I'm not sure if it was a comment in your video or someone shared it like on Reddit or something like that, but they said this is why it doesn't matter. The GHP doesn't matter if you just stick to open and narrative play. Like, if the idea being only competitive people care about these things, and that's why folks are frustrated. And I want to start off by asking, would you describe yourself as a competitive player?
I've very oftenly been described by other people as casually competitive.
Okay.
So the meta that I play in is it's just me and my mates.
Yeah.
We all travel to tournaments as well, but what drives the armies that we choose is very much on what models we like.
For sure.
The lore behind it, that's the first thing. That gets you into the army, and then we start collecting and building. So no one in my group says, well, this is the strongest army out that's dominating, so let's run out and buy that. We all just really get the armies and collect the armies that we like and we love. And then we play those in a bit of an arms race against each other.
Yeah.
And it gets competitive. And then those are the armies that we also take to tournaments. So, I mean, as a group, we do quite well at tournaments. We're not always winning them, but we're normally up in the top sort of quarter or so. And well, not me. Sometimes my gut busters, I get hammered a bit. But I mean, it's nice to travel with your local group and then know that when you're up against the rest of Australia, your group holds up quite well. So casually competitive is probably, I think, where we fit. Yeah,
totally. Okay, that's awesome. Yeah, and that's even one step. I think in the spectrum of competitiveness, that's probably the next up from where I'm at, where I'm just like, I just like painting in lore, and I'll just show up with something, and I do the best I can, but unwilling to really like think about how I play my army. Like, I mean, I usually go like 2-1. That's my average for for a 3-round event, but
2-1's really good.
Yeah, no, it is. Like, I'm not bad at the game. I just don't really think about list building at all.
So I mean, an example would be to emphasize. So all this year, so last year I was trying to be a competitive player.
Okay.
And came 5th at 70-player GTs and this sort of stuff, and would always try to create something that was unique but was super strong, and I was playing to try and win tournaments. This year, I still travelled to tournaments, but I took Gutbusters all year to every major tournament. And I certainly tried to make as hard a Gutbuster list as I can, and I tried to play it as good as I could. But I love Gutbusters, and I love how they play on the table, and they're a very low-tier army at the moment, for example. So I have no problems going to a tournament to play competitively, but I'm happy to do it with a very subpar army.
Okay.
Yeah, so I guess competitive, but, not competitive.
Yeah. No, I think that's. Well, I mean, I'm not even sure I like that wordage, right, that the person used as far as competitive. Because it's like, when you're playing a game, it doesn't matter if it's Monopoly, Chutes and Ladders, whatever. We're all trying to win, in the sense that we are all competing with one another.
Yeah, that's right.
Unless it's a demo. I think demos are the only non-competitive game. And...
I mean, that's so my last episode of Doomcast, I sort of explored this this psychology behind different gamers in a lot more depth, because I just wanted to point out that there are so many different motivations behind why people are at tournaments and what different people get out of the game.
For sure.
That to sort of lump people into boxes like a competitive player or a narrative player is a bit of a falsity, really, because I don't think they're mutually exclusive of each other. I think that they're all really blended in together, and like anything, there's different levels to each one of those aspects. So
for sure.
Yeah, and some people sometimes have that an idea that maybe perhaps some people would have an idea in their head that tournament players all like win at all cost players or something like this, and narrative players are just play whatever they want and there's no rules and no one cares. But it's not like that in any reality, I don't think. And so that was sort of one of the issues that I tried to explore in my last episode.
Yeah, and I that's actually what made me think about this for having you on. And I totally agree with that. And I think I'm trying to think how to articulate this. So I think one of the misnomers is like we forget that everybody is kind of on a spectrum. We kind of make assumptions, and by that I mean, like I am predominantly, like, my favorite kinds of games are asymmetrical narrative games where we're telling a story. I don't really care like what your army you bring like that. Like I often play asymmetrical point games. So I have 1,500 points, you have a 2,000 point list, and I'm trying to survive 5 turns, that kind of stuff.
Right.
I love that stuff. But people will look at a narrative thing like, oh, okay, well, you don't mind points or game balance. Like, no, man, those things are super important because they allow me and my opponent to know what kind of experience we're going to have. And it's just a misnomer to think that game balance doesn't matter if you like telling stories. And so I wanted to ask you, like, your opinion, like, so the misnomer of competitive people ruin the game in the sense of they get down to like abusive things with the rules and exploiting rules gaps. How would you express to somebody like, no, having a well-balanced game is good for everybody, not just the competitive end?
Well, I try to look at the hobby and every single game holistically. So when I'm playing against my friend, I want to make sure that my army is as painted as it can possibly be, as well painted as it can be, so that it gives the best aesthetic appearance and that best immersion sort of for my opponent. I want to make sure that the board looks as good as it can be as well. And then when we play, I want to make sure that actual the engagement with each other through the mechanics of the game itself, we do that to its fullest as well. And I think that that's certainly how we sort of enjoy Warhammer the most, when it's all three of those different components combined. So the armies look amazing and fantastic. The table looks amazing and fantastic as well. And then the actual playing of the game is, to a high level and very tactical as well. So, and that's where the rules balance and well-written rules or come into it, because when it's skewed, when one army is is completely unbalanced, it makes it very hard to engage in the actual game on the tabletop with your opponent to that higher level that you'd really, really like. So an example of this would be at a tournament I was at most recently. And it's funny, just to explain this dynamic, this was my opponent's first ever Age of Sigmar tournament.
Okay.
He's a 40k player, and the only Age of Sigmar army that he owned while he wasn't playing Age of Sigmar was Flesh Eater Courts.
Okay.
Right? They had the book come out, super strong, sort of quite ridiculous power level.
Yep.
And he shows up to his first tournament with Flesh Eater Courts, right? So it's no fault of his. He didn't run out and buy a Flesh Eater Courts. He didn't say, I want to go and win at all costs and break the game. So he just went, I'm going to go to the tournament. This is the only army that I've got. They've got a new book. Cool, let's go. And so I ended up, because I had some early wins, I ended up at quite high tables, like on table 5 with my ogres, which is probably not where I belong. So we both look at each other. Everyone, we both admire each other's armies. We both meet each other. We make friends quite early, and talk about each other's history. So everything is fantastic. And then we get into the game against each other, and we're like, right, let's go. And in one turn, which was turn 2, he took my entire army off the table. Right? And 164 wounds in one battle round. And and there was so he charged into me and he did all this damage. And then it went into my turn, and I looked at it and I thought, if I charge this Terrorgeist, it just goes first. It just kills me. I don't even get to do anything. And I was like, I literally can't do anything. and so we played that out, and I was like, and we became friends. We went out, had dinner, we went out that night and all that sort of thing. And so the game is a huge success as far as I'm concerned. But for the both of us, instead of having that really engaging 3 or 4 or 5 turn game, it was sort of just over so quickly. And that was largely because of the rules imbalance between the two armies, and a little bit of some rules that had been written into the Flesh Eater book, which probably weren't considered as well as they could have been. So so I think that's probably a really good example of where of why it's really important, and it doesn't just impact competitive gamers, but it impacts the game across the board and every aspect of it.
I think that's a terrific example. I mean, in that instance, the point of a game is to engage with other people. I mean, for this game, some games are single player, but you know what I mean. And that a rules we'll call it a discrepancy. I think that's a big asterisk for to call the Flesh Eater Courts thing a discrepancy, but that rules thing prevented that in that moment. It took away from that entire point of what this game is. And that's actually a better example than I could probably ever come up with on my own.
Because there are, like, of the, say, 70 or 100 people that are, like, it doesn't matter if you're just playing around your mate's house or if you're playing at a tournament. It doesn't matter what the setting is. Neither player enjoys it when they just go, okay, my turn. Oh, game's over. No one gets anything out. The person that lost doesn't really enjoy that, and the person that won doesn't get anything out of that either.
No,
So even if it's like, it doesn't matter if it's a tournament game, a narrative game, a competitive game at your friend's house. Whenever you have that disparity between the two armies and the rule sets, and it makes for a non-interactive game, a negative play experience as such, then that's no good.
Totally, yeah, and that's the thing I think about. So I'm in a Discord group with the Rerolling Ones guys. Like anyone can join us. Just big gaming group thing.
Yeah.
And there were some folks talking about, oh yeah, we're doing a Path to Glory at our store, and they were asking some questions about like how to get started, how to promote it. And Path to Glory is my favorite format for this hobby, where it's just, you don't know what you're getting. I like to roll for every single thing. You don't have to, but I like the randomness. I like not knowing what's going on, and you build a little story. That's my jam. That's what I live for. But one of the guys said, oh, well, one of our players is doing Flesh Eater Courts, and I've heard, it's got a great Star Collecting box. Why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, I had heard that they're pretty good. And then the conversation devolved into ways to tell a certain player, like, basically not to play Flesh Eater Courts. I'm like, no. Like, that.
Yeah.
That's the opposite of what the company wants to do. First of all, they want to push product. But here's this scenario, much like yours, where it is intended to be a 100% narrative experience just to get people in the door and exposed to the hobby. But even that moment, right, what has nothing to do with competitive scene at all, is being robbed because of a perceived, an imbalance, but also a perceived one that's so big that people shouldn't play it. So, absolutely.
One thing with that is often, perception is everything in a lot of ways. But sometimes people will talk about the negatives of the imbalances so much, and you hear it spread across all the boards. You hear the content creators constantly talking about how overpowered a certain faction is, for example, that it sets up this experience in your head before it's even happened. And you can go, and I always use tournaments as examples, just because these are instances where you have 70 different armies gathered together, right? So it's a big data pool to sort of explore, and so you could have 7 Flesh Eater Courts at that tournament, but it's only actually maybe 1 or 2 of those Flesh Eater Courts that really go into that broken negative player experience space, and the rest of them are fine. People are just not taking optimize, they're playing with what they've got, and there's really no problem. So I'm always hesitant just to go, well, just because this person is playing this army which is perceived to be broken, that we should automatically write that player off or not engage or convince him not to play Flesh Eater Courts, for example. I still think we should encourage people to play whatever they like, the theme of the army, the way that army plays, just go into it, and we should probably apply pressure back to Games Workshop as far as feedback to say, this is, let's try and stop this happening again.
No, absolutely, and I 100% agree with that. I think at the end of the day, the most important thing is like everyone's enjoying what they do. And I think what you just touched on was really important. Like, not everyone, you can see Flesh Eater Courts taken in a way that's not Gristlegore, right? There's other things in that book besides Gristlegore, which also happen to be incredibly effective and dishearteningly good. But I played Blister Skin the other day, and I was just like, oh my god. But yeah, I mean, just giving everyone a fair shake. I mean, you look at lists like some Stormcast lists like mine, where it's just a lot of everything, and I love taking the Celestin Prime because he's just looks amazing. Someone says Stormcast on like a tournament sheet for what your pairings are, and that doesn't mean much until then the next Stormcast player you play is Jack from Rerolling Ones with his shootcast, where he deletes people in 20 minutes. And it's just so the point is, like, don't judge a faction by one build.
No, there are different levels to everything.
For sure, and I think that's something that I'm conscious of in terms of, like, if I was playing one of those armies, I would just try to explore different things. You shouldn't feel bad about having a book that's really good, despite internet shame. But at the same time, I think being prepared to play at different levels is probably wise, and can make sure that people have good experiences with you. And
it's the dynamic of who you're playing against is so important. So if you're looking at playing random pickup games, for example, that's really the scenario, I think, where a fully optimized over the top Flesh Eater Courts army, for example, the old Flesh Eater Courts, could be problematic because you show up just with your army or whatever, and the random person you end up playing against is taking the hardest list you can imagine. But I actually don't think that scenario plays out very often at all.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I haven't certainly had a game like that for years, and even when I used to go down to the store and just say who wants to play, pardon me, it was probably 1 in 10, 1 in 20 games where someone would just put down the most horrendous thing that I could possibly think about. So what I normally find is that it's like a mini arms race, So if you have someone in your path to glory that is playing Flesh Eater Courts,
mm-hmm.
and he beats you once or twice, you think to yourself, oh, you know what? You're friends by this point, no doubt, because you've had 2 or 3 games together and whatever else, and you're talking a lot in chat groups and things like that. And you start thinking, you know what, I'm going to go out and I'm going to get the unit of long strikes. I'm going to go get this. And you end up in this little mini meta where you're competitive against each other on a completely friendly basis. And it just grows and grows and grows. And it's all good fun. I don't find many real situations where people just walk away from the whole hobby and walk away from their gaming group because one person has brought the strongest thing that made it unfun for one game or two. Most people go, you know what, I'm going to find a way to get this guy, and that becomes a fun challenge in itself.
Yeah, and I think that's something, especially when we're in these little weird interim places where we're waiting for GW to fix something that's clearly not what they intended or foresaw. Having that mindset of like, I'm going to embrace this as a fun challenge for the average folk, not for the the top level tournament players. They can do it. They're going to do whatever they're going to do, no matter what. But
that's right. Yeah.
I don't know. Have you noticed? And I asked this because it was asked to me, and I'm not sure how I feel about the question. That so I did wargaming before they were really large online communities for it.
Okay. Yeah.
That when people talk about the game, and it's largely talked about in the context of competitiveness,
right?
That kind of skews people's perception of the game in terms of like. Go ahead.
Skews it for well, I think if you go onto a forum or something like that, and you look at almost any discussion that happens, there'll be someone that's, for example, say someone's complaining about Thunder Tusks. Right?
Yep.
Because they can do, 6 mortal wounds just sort of on the roll of a 2-up, and when you get hit by a bunch of those, it's really quite horrible.
Yep.
And if it's just you and me playing against each other all the time, and you keep smashing me with Thunder Tusks, then I'm going to get quite upset. I make a post. I say Thunder Tusks are overpowered or broken or negative play experience. And within 2 seconds, someone will bring those Thunder Tusks back to a tournament setting and say, well, no, they're not. You don't know what you're talking about because, Beastlore Raiders have a win rate of 28% and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And so I think it's true that majority of discussions seem to devolve or head towards what happens in the competitive scene. And everything does get tarred in a way with a competitive brush. So I think that is true. It happens all the time. Content creators focus on it as well. It is a very exciting part of Warhammer, and like I said, it is so good to talk about because there are, it's very rare that you get to play 5 or 6 games of Warhammer in 2 days. And so that's like one fantastic thing. And then it's also one of the few times where you do get so many different armies in a spot competing against each other. But I think there's a little bit of a problem, and this is a problem that you can just apply to social media as a blanket rule, I think. And it's a problem that I've had with my actual channel, and is that I get pigeonholed into the tournament scene, and I start to focus on things that really aren't a problem. So the video that you were talking about where I was venting my frustrations with the rules,
Yeah.
right? Basically what had happened is that with the release of the activation wars and the always strikes first, the game was going in a very different direction to what I generally enjoyed.
Yep.
And I hadn't said anything for quite some time. I don't like to be overly negative, but I'm happy to be negative when I need to. But I don't think there's much benefit that comes out of being overly negative.
Totally.
And so I'd had these months and months of build up of seeing things that the game which I love so much, go in a direction which I didn't really enjoy, and then the GHB came out. It was quite disappointing for me, and there was just the comment about as deadly as ever. And I was like, oh, God damn it. That's it. You burst the dam. Here it comes. But you see, the reason I bring that up is that everyone is talking about the activation wars. Everyone is talking about, oh, well, how do you beat Slanesh at a tournament when they just fight first with everything? How do you beat Flesh Eater Courts when they do this first? Corn, blah, blah, blah. And everywhere you go, if it's on a thread, a forum, if you're listening to a podcast, you hear about it. But the reality is that in the last year of playing Warhammer, I play Warhammer pretty much every single weekend,
Mm-hmm.
and then I travel to tournaments as well. In the last year of Warhammer, I've had one game against Flesh Eaters where that happened.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Only one game. And for all my friends that I play with against here and around here, it doesn't happen. It's not really a problem that I have to face. And we're so fixated on the hypotheticals and what happens at the toppest tables of certain tournaments, not what happens about what in the other 90% of the tournament, but only on that top few tables. And it starts to build up, and all of a sudden you're left in a situation where you go, well, this is horrible and it's all bad and it's negative. But when you stop and you just take a step back and you think about it, you go, okay, I can see where this could be problematic, but it's not really an issue in my Warhammer Age of Sigmar.
Yep.
And when I consider just the games that I play against my friends, I'm only having a ton of fun, and Age of Sigmar is better than ever. And then when I switch to the let's say the social media side of it, I'm like, oh no, it's all of a sudden there's these problems with the rules and it's this and that, and so I think, and it's a trap that I fell into personally, and also as a YouTube channel, and because I was so involved in the community and the and the content community as well, you sort of have to be focused on that.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought to myself, you know what, this is bringing a negative into my Age of Sigmar, which isn't actually really a negative in my Age of Sigmar if I take a step back and look at it. And so, so I think so often the focus does turn towards competitive play and tournaments, but I think we all just have to be very mindful to take what we read and what we hear about with a grain of sand, and we can only see the world through our own eyes, and just look at what's happening in our meta with our friends in the games that we're playing, and think, you know what, it's not so bad.
Dude, you and I just had that stepbrother. It's like, did we just become best friends? Yeah. Because I've been talking about that quite a bit before with people, or just like, we're and this is a more of a philosophical musing that goes far beyond wargaming, but with our social media world of like exchanging information about a lot of things, like it can kind of mess with your perception a little bit and skew some things where it's like, we're talking about Flesh Eater Courts and Slanesh are really easy picks, so we'll just pick on them for a while, where it's just, is it a problem? Sure, yeah, but is it a problem for you to get mad enough to tell someone not to join the hobby with that army? Well, no. You know what I mean? Like, there's no reason to say no to somebody. There's no reason to shut down what someone likes. Like, you can have those discussions of, hey man, you've been kicking our teeth in for 9 weeks and we're trying to tell a story here. I think maybe you could let off the gas pedal. Like, there's a conversation, sure. But is it world ending to the point where you need to tell someone to not enjoy themselves? Like, no.
Yeah.
But I go ahead.
I mean, there's a natural evolution of how that plays out as well. I mean, I've been wargaming for for quite a long time. And back in the Warhammer Fantasy days, I used to take the hardest list that you could possibly imagine, and I did have quite a few of those mixed matches, and I was on the giving end of it sometimes. And what you find is that then you do that a few times, and then you're like, "Hey guys, who wants to have a game?" And there's crickets. You hear crickets, and you're like, "Okay, maybe I should just think about how I'm playing a little bit." Um, because so it sort of naturally starts to sort itself out as well without having to intentionally exclude anyone or saying, "No, man, don't do that," or whatever. I think people, after a little bit of time, find the rhythm and find where they need to be. And if they do need to tone it down a bit for their local meta, um, it will probably naturally play out that way.
Totally. Yeah, and I think that's... I do think sometimes we bleed our local groups too much with like national or international metas, where it's,
Yeah.
like you were just describing, like it's kind of like a social contract with your friends. Someone's getting a little too rough, all of a sudden we can all like, "Hey, buddy, we're not playing like that." That's fine. That's a sort of, whereas if you go to a tournament like a Adepticon or what do you guys have down there for your big events?
So CanCon is the biggest that we have. Yeah.
You go to CanCon where like that social expectation is you come to win, right? You bring your hardest thing, and that's fine. It's all bets off.
Yeah. Well, it's not even that. Like you do bring your... See, so a lot of people, even at something where like CanCon, 240 player tournament, and out of those 240 people, I would say that there's only 40 people there that have actually done that. That have actually brought the hardest list that they can and are there to play to try and do as well as they can. Most people... So one thing for anyone that doesn't know is that I've done a lot of list reviews, and it sort of for a long time was my thing where people would approach me and say, "Can you do a list review of our tournament?" That's essentially where we run through everyone's list and we just talk about our opinions on how well we think it's going to go, or how strong or weak, or whether it's cool or whatever it is. And one thing that you see with that is that at a 70-player tournament, for example, there's only really like maybe 14 people there that have got the hard list, the strong list, and are playing to win. And everyone else is just for the experience of having 5 or 6 games in 2 days, of meeting new friends, of seeing all the cool hobby. Like I always say, when your friends spend 6 months getting an army ready, and then you play against them, like you're like, cool, I appreciate how much effort you have put into making this happen. This is amazing. And then you go to the tournaments and it's that times 70.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, this is like a real hobby experience and it's fantastic. And most people I find at tournaments are not there to win, and they're there just for the fun of having all those games in a row and that sort of event-like experience. That's why I always recommend to people, it doesn't matter if you have a strong army, a weak army. It doesn't matter what your motivation is. It doesn't matter if you're completely inexperienced and you've never had any games at all before. Just go. Just sign up and go. And pretty much everyone is super, super friendly. You'll see so much fantastic hobby. Just the buzz of that's in the room of everyone playing Warhammer and talking about their games afterwards. It's just such a positive thing that
totally.
You're going to be just absolutely hooked.
That's awesome. And I absolutely fully encourage that. I'm actually going to my first big event in in a week. I'm going to Nova. I'm very excited.
That'll be excellent. Yeah, it'll be excellent. I mean, for you as well, like, people love you so much, Doug, that honestly, you're going to go there and people are going to be coming up to you, telling you how much they love your stuff. And, you're going to meet so many people that you have, interacted with on the internet, but never actually met before.
Yep.
And it's just going to be so good. I bet you're going to have the time of your life.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to it, man. I'm going to hold you to that.
Yeah, no. And like I said, most people just aren't there to win at all costs. In fact, no one is. Very few people, and even if that was a concern that you're going to come up against these super hard edge playing sort of people.
Mm-hmm.
It's very, very super rare, and it's very unlikely to happen.
Yeah,
Most people are, yeah.
I'm actually I decided not for my first one to play in like the major GT. I'm doing the doubles with Jack from Reeling Once,
Mm-hmm.
and so we'll be doing that. And then, but just based on what you just described, like I'm very excited on the what is it Saturday is the big GT. I'm just gonna wander around. I just want to see like because I've listened to your list reviews as I paint because it's like 2 hours of talking about the hobby while I paint, and so I really enjoy that. But yeah, I want to go around and see it for myself because I hear about. I mean, all we hear about is like the top tables and what's doing well. But I want to see the guy who's there. He's just like, you know what I like. I like Shadow Warriors or whatever they are, the elves that like hide or whatever like that.
Oh, I'll tell you the truth. Some of the most fun you will ever have at any tournament is on the bottom tables, right?
Oh yeah.
So once you've lost like one or two, and both people are playing against each other, and they know that there's no chance of podium or doing well, both people are just there to have as much fun in that game as possible, and yeah, it's absolutely excellent. So yeah, the worst thing that the worst result for someone who is not there to play, say, competitively, is just there to have 5 games and have fun. The worst possible thing that would happen to you is that you have one first game where you come up against one of the top tier players there, and he beats you really quickly. He's still super polite and nice and friendly about it.
Mm-hmm.
The game's over, and then you get to go drink some beers with your mates while you wait for your next game. And then the rest of the games are against normally people, like-minded people, there to have fun. A comparable power level between your armies as well. And yeah, it's just really, really good.
Yeah, I've noticed that with the local events that I've been to, where if you ever been in, like, you go to a college class and you sit down and the teacher walks in and starts talking, then you realize you're in the wrong class and you're like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm not supposed to be here. That's what the first round of my tournaments are like, where it's just like, oh, you mean this? I'm gonna go.
Yeah, no, it's and sometimes you'll pull a surprise upset, because one thing that happens a lot is that so someone might take an anti-meta army, right? So they take an all-shooting army, for example, because they've been listening to too much online content, and they think that everyone is going to bring Flesh Eater Courts and Slanesh, and there's just going to be these big monsters that they have to shoot off. And the games that they get are just against mid-tier or low-tier armies that actually pose a real problem for what they've brought. And they never, ever get a chance to play against what they've designed the whole list to do. So sometimes you can come up against a really good player who has brought this anti-meta army, and you just beat him with your ordinary army, your Slaves to Darkness, whatever it is, because he was not planning in any way to be playing against you.
What do you mean knights have 3 wounds? That's all you got?
What do you mean you don't have a single big monster for me to shoot off?
I like it.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Let's grab a paint. Here.
But even this conversation is a good example of how so many conversations in this hobby digress to tournaments, or revert to a tournament focus, right? Because we started off talking about why rules balance is and good rules play, tight rules play, is important to all different types of Warhammer, and now we've divulged straight to tournaments.
Yeah, no, and it's a great example, and I'm glad you pointed that out, because it's because I think the hardest part of that conversation is breaking what people think of when they write off, oh, this is for tournament people or competitive folks or win at all costs, like much like we make fake avatars for like what we think about political parties, like, oh, the Democrats think blank, whatever,
right?
Then we make fake people. It's like, well, actually most folks just want to push their models forward and laugh a lot. And I think that, even though yes, we have talked about competitive stuff, like I think that that's super important to be like, no, they're just people who enjoy the hobby. I mean, that's all there is.
I think a good analogy for this whole dynamic, and I am loath to bring politics up in any instance, in these sorts of conversations. But
Mhm.
on social media and on the news and things like that, especially in America, you see these references constantly: the right and the left,
Yep.
right? And people are so quick just to put oh, you are the left or the
Mhm.
right, but in reality, just about every single person is a blend of both of
Yep.
those belief systems, right? And that's for almost everyone out there is
Yep.
like that. They believe a little bit from here and a little bit from there. And Warhammer is exactly the same with competitive and narrative and so forth. People are sometimes very quick to say competitive players or narrative players or open players or whatever, and
Mhm.
just put them in those boxes. But in reality, we're their blend of all of those things together, and that's what we should all realistically expect
Totally.
from Warhammer.
Well said. I
So
mean,
yeah,
yeah, no, that's. I don't think that's so much of a. Well, it is about politics, but at the same time, it's like that's just we do that for a lot of things in our lives. I think.
yeah, yeah.
So absolutely. But kind
I,
of. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say my advice would be like if you um, find yourself in that situation where you start thinking like that, like this is just for competitive players or this is just for narrative players or whatever, or if you have a perception of something which is a possible barrier for you playing Age of Sigmar, just try and put that aside and just go start rolling dice. That's the only advice I can really give to people is just put all of that stuff to the side, all the social media, everything you read and hear, and go start rolling dice with your
Mm-hmm.
friends or to make friends. And very quickly, so much of that will go out the window, and issues that you thought were issues are not issues. Aspects of competitive players that you thought were problematic are not.
Yep.
And vice versa for people that enjoy more narrative games or anything like that. So you just got to get there, start rolling dice, and you see very very quickly that the reality is different to the perception, I believe.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, because that works both ways. Because you raised an interesting point where it's not just narrative folks being like competitive people are rules abusive or always going for the hardest things, but it's also folks who do enjoy the more matched play side of things,
Mm-hmm.
saying that like all narrative games are there's no tactics to them because
Yeah,
they're asymmetrical. It's like, nah, man, like there's been some pretty clutch moments in my life.
yeah,
um,
no, that absolutely goes both ways because that is a very common perception for tournament players or people that would traditionally be put in that competitive player box.
mhm.
Is they say, well, narrative players are just like playing with dolls. There's no, it's just like do whatever you want. There's no rules, make them up as you go. Ooh. But that's not true. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? So, but both groups sort of do it to each other, not realizing that there actually are no groups.
Yeah.
That we're all just one.
We
Yeah,
are
yeah,
the world.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah,
Well, and perfect segue back to our core theme here of just like when we stop looking at each other as categories rather than just people who all enjoy the same thing,
yeah.
and maybe enjoy different aspects of the hobby in terms of list building and modeling and that kind of stuff. Um, the question of like why does a good game set help people who aren't competitive? Why is it good to have a balanced game no matter what you do? It's like because it just gives us all the experience we want. It helps the competitive people enjoy their thing. It facilitates meaningful, memorable games for narrative folks. It doesn't rob you of your social interactions, like you mentioned in your example with the Flesh Eater Court player who took you out in round two.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's incredibly powerful and important. Do you have any thoughts on like what are probably the better ways to express when something does need to change? Whether you're thinking so from a competitive or narrative perspective, like what do you think is the best way to get GW's attention and make those things happen?
I would say that Games Workshop actually does pick up on a lot of the, I think a lot of what people are doing already. So it's got to be a combination of direct email. So if you are having games and something is really unenjoyable for you in whatever context, you need to shoot them an email directly to say this is what's happened. It really is not enjoyable.
Yep.
I think it's ridiculous or it's broken or whatever it is. And then also you do see via social media with Game Workshop coming back to the community, you see a groundswell of reaction to certain things, and they do generally, I find, react to it at the moment. So even if it's something like a community article where they say just as deadly as ever, and that gets people's back up a bit, and then a lot of people go on the social media and make fun of it, people actually see that. The people that have written the articles see that, the people in the design studio see that, and they think, oh, okay, maybe we've done a boo-boo. The same with Slanesh and Flesh Eater Courts and these sorts of things. If there's an overwhelming focus on the negativity around that, they pick it up and they do try to fix it generally, but it does take, obviously, a little bit of time to do it. So I think the only thing to be mindful of, I think you should absolutely give all your feedback to Games Workshop in whichever format you'd like, and in fact all the formats. I mean, if you're not screaming at the top of your lungs, then perhaps they won't hear you, but the only thing I would be mindful of is that, and it's something for me that only started to happen when I got onto Twitter, and all of a sudden a lot of the Games Workshop staff are following me and interacting, and I'm thinking to myself, wow, whereas I used to give feedback thinking I was in this sort of void, right? Where no one was going to hear it anyways, and whatever else, I started to realize, hang on a minute, the people that have actually written this, the people that are doing the art, the people that are designing this game are actually listening and paying attention. And if I am just saying things callously, then that's actually hurtful. There are still people behind this giant machine that's Games Workshop. And so by all means, give the negative feedback and scream at the top of your lungs. But I think always just be mindful that there are real people there. And if you were the rules writer or the model designer or whatever it was, and you'd put 3 months, 6 months of effort into pulling this thing together, sure, you're going to want to hear the negatives, but then you start to just get sort of almost personal vitriol, then that would probably be hurtful. I think we can give our feedback without being hurtful to people. So I think that's the only thing I would say is that, be truthful, be honest, give the feedback in whatever way. If it's on Facebook, Twitter, or direct emails, do all of that. But just be mindful that real people do actually see that. And people really put a lot of effort into this, and no one at Games Workshop is trying to make something bad, or no one's trying to create a negative play experience. Often I hear people say, "Well, they just want to sell models," and I don't think creating negative experiences for people is the best way to sell a model. So, that would be my only advice.
Cool, and I'm super glad you touched on the fact that they're real humans. Actually, it's funny because I had the exact same experience. Like I had, I don't really do talk much about game balance. I'll do lore videos, but I did jump on Twitter like in the last, 3 months, and I was like, oh, these are like real people. Like, oh, Gav Thorpe liked my picture, and I was like, I love it.
Yeah, and I'm actually guilty of doing what I just told everyone not to do in the past. Yep. I've made videos and put feedback out there that is probably quite personalized, and I've fired some shots, but people can change, and like I said before, I used to do it in a void where I had no interaction with the GW, didn't know anyone that worked there, and no communication from them either. So it was just like firing stuff out into the aether.
Yeah.
And then I realized, I was like, hang on a minute, some ways that I'm giving this feedback, I'm being a jerk, and so then I changed that about myself because I thought I wouldn't like someone to be saying these things about something that I've made. And in fact, I get that in my own work. I'm a geologist, and we explore for gold, and sometimes shareholders or just anomalous people on share trading sites start writing. They start writing about your company and the work that you're doing. And I've spent 3 or 6 months working on this project, 2-3 years in some instances. And
This guy
and
even
these
know what
people,
gold looks like?
yeah, that's what it's like. They're just writing comments. They have no context about how things work or why they're doing it, why we're doing it this way. They have no understanding of the process, no understanding of geology, no understanding of exploration,
Yep.
and they're writing these huge paragraphs about what they think and what they feel, and this is ridiculous. And you read that, and I just think to myself, this must be what Games Workshop feels like sometimes.
I like
So
that.
yeah, it's helped me to put things in perspective a little bit.
Oh, that's so funny. Yeah, no, absolutely. It's funny that like I feel like a reoccurring theme in our conversation, I would keep going back to it, is this like remembering that no matter how you approach the game, like fundamentally, like this game is just about interacting with other people. It facilitates that. And so when it comes down to whether it's why do we want good rules or how do we change rules that seem wrong, I don't know. We kind of just touched on the same note over and over again of just like everyone's just people and just be nice to people, which is like a very Sunday morning cartoon thing. But at the same time, I think it's because of the way that social media works and content creators and frankly, like memes and how we all make memes about stuff. I am super guilty that we dehumanize each other. We're to the point where we forget why things matter. And that means rules balance. That means how we talk. It means a lot of stuff.
Yeah. And patience is a virtue.
Yes.
That's the other thing I would say. Patience is a virtue. And I mean, but on the flip side of that, often something is released by Games Workshop, which seemingly the community picks up in the first day or two.
Yep.
The books come out, right?
Yep.
So very quickly, you just look at it and go, "That's broken. How did that not get picked up?" And you think to yourself, well, I think they could work a bit. Firstly, do a little bit more work to stop this coming out like this. And I think that's fair. And then we could also say, I think also perhaps there's an easy solution to some of this. But I think, and so we get frustrated because we pick up these problems quite quickly. We can see a pretty good solution quite quickly, and then we get frustrated. Why does this take so long? And then we think, well, we set expectations. So that's the other thing. We set our expectations. We say, surely this will get fixed in the FAQ.
Yep.
And then it doesn't. And then we're like, rah! But patience, because I mean, what often inevitably happens, and I'm not saying that this is the excuse for that, but often 4 months down the track, which in the scheme of the hobby is not a long time.
Yep.
We've got 2 or 3 new armies out, and that changes everything again. We're in a whole new different game. And so just I always say, try to put it back into the context of the games you're actually having, as opposed to what we're seeing online. So in that 3 months, I've only had 6 games, and none of those were against Lanesh anyways. So don't worry.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I'm going to keep my rage to an acceptable level, and totally. Well, I think that is probably the best wisdom to leave on, as far as like, narrative folks don't. I don't want to say that because I don't want to but again, the label thing, it's hard to discuss. If you love narrative games, don't assume that competitive folks are breaking everything, but also understand that good rules help all of us have a good time and facilitate interactions on every level, and that people are just people.
I just think that not having that skew or that big disparity makes any game that we're having, be it competitive or narrative, to be so much more enjoyable, and it's super important to that engagement between two people. And let's just be mindful about putting people in these boxes to say, well, it's only a problem for competitive people, or it's only a narrative problem, when really we're all in the same space and we're all different blends of all those different categories.
Yeah, man. Well, hey, thank you so much for joining me. Those are awesome thoughts.
No, thanks for having me on. It's been I can tick this one off the bucket list now.
Yeah. Oh, the bucket. Oh my gosh, I'm not worthy of anyone's bucket list. So, I want you to go ahead and just plug anything you want to plug as far as your channel, gaming groups, anything like that. Please lay it on us.
Oh no, well, my channel is Doom and Darkness, and that's fine. You can find that on YouTube, and there's nothing more I want to say there. But okay. I would just like to say to everyone that if you do have a channel, if you do have any sort of platform at all, when people start their own channel, they start their own blog, whatever it is, just engage with it, just check it out, give everyone a chance, see if you like it. And you never know when a new channel is going to come along and all of a sudden it's the next 2 Plus Tough. Right, so just it is a great community, and we have a lot of content creators. And I think that's just reflective of the size.
Oh yeah.
And let's just prop everyone up, as opposed to putting everyone down. Less social media, more love. Amen.
I love it. Okay, cool. Well, I'll have links to your channel and stuff down below. And thank you so much for joining me, man. It was a lot of fun.
No worries, man. It's my pleasure. Thank you.